friends, happy Halloween! This is one of my favorite holidays ever. I hope you enjoy Halloween. But yeah, it's pretty much tied with Christmas, but I love Halloween. We don't really, so we celebrate the 1st of November here, which is the Day of All Saints. So basically it's when you go to the cemetery and you visit like your dead relatives. So cemeteries are really pretty after the 1st of November because they're all full of flowers. But Halloween isn't really a thing. It wasn't, but now it is because of, globalization. When I was a kid, I remember I wanted to celebrate, we call it, like in Portuguese, you'd say like Day of the Witches or Witches Day. But yeah. Now it's like more and more celebrated. People would knock on your door, but it's on November 1st to ask for bread for God. So it's like for church. I don't know why I'm giving you this trivia. I don't think you really care, but there you go, you're welcome. So today, I bring you a sort of late book recommendation for Halloween or Samhain. Whether you celebrate it for real or just, as a fun holiday. So, instead of, giving you a book recommendation for, things to read leading up to Halloween, you can read these on Halloween to celebrate Samhain. Or like if you want to do a readathon, maybe like a 24-hour readathon, like the ones that Zoe usually hosts. So these are all great options to read on Halloween to celebrate the Sabbath. I'm gonna go in order of, I think, fastest to read, whether that means page counts or just accessibility. But yeah. So let us start with a childhood favorite that I actually don't remember the last time I read this, but every time I show you a book that is translated into Portuguese, it's been a long time that I've had it for a long time. So I'm talking about The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, which translates to The Strange Life of Nobody Owens. So, this is a very obvious choice. I was debating whether or not to, recommend this or Coraline, but I feel like Coraline is already like recommended so much. I'm sure you've heard of it. Maybe you've read it and you liked it, I hope, because it is a great book. But I think to read on Halloween, on Samhain, this is just, the Neil Gaiman book to go with. So Nobody Owens is raised in a cemetery by ghosts. Yeah. So something I really like here is that the safe place is a cemetery as opposed to the opposite where, the cemetery is his safe place, and the outside is the part that's dangerous, that has the danger in it. There's a character here named Silas, and that name is also present in another book that I'm going to talk about, which is pretty cool. With every Neil Gaiman, it feels very magical, it's a short book, and you're going into it for the whimsy and the magic, but then it hits you quite hard. It has a lot of substance to it. Highly recommend, and I feel like this is really easy to read in one day, like in one sitting for Halloween. Highly recommend. Next is one of my favorite books ever, my favorite horror book, although you don't do this where you distinguish it, but we usually distinguish horror from terror. But that words fell out of use in the US because of terrorism. But there's this big distinction between horror and terror. Horror, it's usually like something that's gory, something that you need to face head on It's horror, it's horrifying. But terror is more in the suspense bucket of scary books. You know what I mean? I'm doing a very terrible job at explaining this for a grad student, but that's how my brain is today. But terror is what keeps you up at night and you have no idea what it is. It's, the creaking floorboards and you don't know, and then you open the door and there's no one there. So that's my favorite type of horror, because you usually do the umbrella term in English. But yeah, so this is not only it's my favorite horror book of all time, but it's also one of my favorite books in general. And I'm talking about Rosemary's Baby by Ariel Levin. This is a cult classic, okay? It actually had a sequel that we don't talk about, but this is incredible. So why is this book, why does it stand out? So this book is from 1967. So why does it still stand out so much? Why does it creep you out so much still? This was one of the first books to take horror and bring it to your home. So instead of the character going to a haunted mansion or this like creepy ass castle or something, the horror factor is in their house, is in the mundane, in the, in your territory. It seeps into your daily life. It's so good, honestly. And I feel like this is the sort of book that even if you know the twist, it's still such an enjoyable read, because it's not just about what they're telling, it's how it's told, which is obviously very important. But if you can avoid knowing the twist, then perfect. You'll love it, I'm sure. So the book follows this couple that moves into this old apartment building in New York called the Bramford. And at first everything's perfect because it's their dream apartment. It's this very famous building. But then they meet their neighbors, Minnie and Roman. But then things start to get creepy. And I really don't read the blurb. I would say don't read the summary on the book. I don't know, like, it doesn't really spoil anything, but just go with what I told you. Just trust me. It's really good. So this is also a very short book, and even if it wasn't, you won't be able to put it down, I personally think. So I made my mom read this, and she always thought she hated horror. Like, I don't like this. It's, the one genre I won't pick up. And she loved it. She loved this book. So just read it. Trust me. My next recommendation is a bit similar in tone to Rosemary's Baby, and I am talking about a very recent read for me, which was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. So I am a huge fan of the show. I watched the show before I read the book, like full disclosure. I love it. I am currently rewatching it, although I'm always sort of rewatching it because I keep going back to certain episodes. It's so good. And I feel like you can do either way. You can read the book first or watch the show first, because they're so different. They like the plot line is completely different. There are a lot of elements that you see, where the show got them from in the book, but the story is very, very different. This would also fall within the terror side of horror. It is creepy, eerie, and you never really know what's what. Who is doing, who or what is doing the haunting. Is there a haunting. Again, I don't want to spoil because there isn't really that much to spoil in terms of plot. It's really about the atmosphere, the characters, how they interact, and the fact that Shirley made the house a character. So the house really plays a role here. And you know, at what extent is it, you know, manipulating the characters? I give it 4 stars. So it wasn't, you know, a Rosemary's Baby to me, but I mean, what is Rosemary's Baby? You know, what can reach that level of perfection? And it's also very strange. A lot of the dialogues are, they are weird. It's a weird book. It's very, very, you know, one of a kind. It's its own thing, like David S. Pumpkins. His own thing. So if you've also watched the show, and you love the show and you're scared to read the book, just know that it is very different, but I think you will also enjoy it because you will appreciate how the show creators basically are paying an homage to Shirley and her work. I was rewatching it and I noticed that in a scene Theo is reading another book by Shirley Jackson. I think it was The Lottery. When she's reading in the yard or something, she's reading The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, which is really cool. So, and you see a lot of the small elements, non-spoilery, just with a lot of symbolic meaning. You know, they're taken from here and put in different circumstances in the show. That's very cool. So it's kind of a love letter, I think. It's not really an adaptation. It's really a love letter to this book and the author, which I loved. It was a very different take. So the characters have the same names, but they're completely different characters. It just took these names to name their characters. Some of them have, you know, similar traits, but, you know, again, I don't want to go into it. So not to spoil you, but for example, one character in the show is named Shirley after the author, not a character. It's really cool. So if you haven't watched the show, then no problem, just read it. I hope you like it. If you have watched the show, take this into account and I think you will enjoy it as well. Yeah. So let us go back to something I said in a previous video, that there is a Maggie Steve Otter book for each season. So I recommended the Raven Cycle for, you know, autumn in general, or the Mabon Sabbath. But there's still great books to read for Halloween or Samhain. You can do like a crazy readathon and read the 4 books, which if you're enjoying them, very much doable. You know, you could just read right through them. But I do have a specific recommendation for Samhain, and that is All the Crooked Saints by Maggie Stiefvater. I was really excited when I first picked up this book because one of the main characters has the same name as me, with the same spelling, so not the English version, it's Beatriz. Although here it's technically Spanish, but it's the same name, same spelling, similar pronunciation, and that was really exciting to me because I never really saw my name in a book. Even like the English version, it's very rare to find a character named Beatrice or whatever, or B. So that was really cool. And I remember like reading Beatrice, the girl without feelings who wants only to be free to examine her thoughts, and I was like, who is she? I love her. Like, so I love this because, again, it's Maggie Stiefvater, so magical realism. This plays with a lot of folklore that is not Portuguese folklore, but relates very much to our own culture and relation to religion. So here you have a character that can perform miracles. There's this very a specific relation to religion and superstition and magic and, you know, spirituality. That really reminds me of being in, you know, my grandma's village and hearing all of these stories about miracles that were performed there, and this lady that was supposedly a saint, supposedly a saint, and witches that would come out at night and there would be like lights over a lake. It just, I love that because it really reminded me of being a little girl and hearing my grandma and my great grandma telling me all of these stories that they swear to this day that they are true, and you know, and I love them dearly. So there's this idea of connection within their family and within their heritage and their culture, which I think is perfect for Samhain. Specifically if you come from a background like an Hispanic background or Iberian background. So yeah, it's a very magical book to read on Halloween. And I really like the blurb. Here's a thing everyone wants, a miracle. Here's a thing everyone fears, what it takes to get one. So this is my Maggie Steve Otter for Halloween. So next up is something a little bit different, and that is Affinity by Sarah Waters. This is sort of it's described as a gothic historical novel, which is the best way to describe it to you without spoiling some aspects of the book, because you're not really sure, you know, what's going on. Is this supernatural? Is it more of a psychological thriller? So it is a gothic historical novel. So this book follows Margaret Pryor, yes, Margaret Pryor, who has gone through some things, and so she decides to visit a women's prison as part of sort of her rehabilitation, like making herself useful. It's described as pursuing some good work. And there she meets this spiritualist, Selena Dawes, and she is just completely drawn by her. Selena and her story are very, very interesting, very captivating. So Margaret basically falls off the deep end and gets sucked into Selena's life, Selena's story. This is told in a dual perspective. You have Margaret's entries in the timeline where she's visiting Selena in prison, and then you have Selena's entries, which are told before she is in prison. So what led her to be there, and you get all of these insights into seances that were done in the Victorian era. So this is more on the psychological thriller side of the spectrum. If you get into it, it's also a very quick read because you will want to know what is up and what is up with Selena specifically. You know, what really is her story? Is she a fraud? Is she, you know, telling the truth? I will say that it is slow moving. So this is better if you care a lot about atmosphere. If it's very gloomy, it's eerie, and it keeps you on your toes. You never really know if they are reliable narrators, either of them. You know, how well is Margaret doing? Is Selena telling us the entire truth? So it's a very making this face sort of book, so you're always like, I don't know. I don't trust either of them. But great atmosphere. The relationship with them. Oh, it's also a female-female romance, by the way. I forgot to mention. Sarah Waters is described. Where did I see this? I think it was in an article there, because I wrote a paper on this book as the lesbian Charles Dickens, and I think that's the perfect description for Sarah Waters and her work, the lesbian Charles Dickens. So I recommend this if you would like to read some lesbian Charles Dickens. So I have 2 more books. They are a little bit bigger than the previous ones, but I feel like they can be very fast reads. So the first one is a recent read and a recent favorite. 5 stars already added to my favorites shelf. It made me cry. This beauty that made me cry like an 11-year-old again is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I loved this book so much. When I finished reading it, I was already crying, and then I went back and I read that she had dedicated it to, give me a second so I can find. Okay. For all the girls who found themselves in books. And I started crying. So this was a great book. And it made me feel like I felt reading books when I was 10, 11, 12. The magic, I don't know. I hadn't been this immersed in, you know, a standalone fantasy for a very long time. I could gush about this book for a very long time, but maybe I'll save that up for a review, maybe if you would like to hear one. So what I am going to say is that this is all about books and magic and magical books. So you have grimoires and you have sorcerers and you have librarians who can talk to books and books can talk to you. And it's incredible. I don't know, it's everything I've ever wanted to read. I feel like it read like a book that was tailored to me. It was just so magical. Every, you know, big fantasy reader, I feel like they will love this book so much. It's perfect for now. It's filled with magic and sorcerers. And I will say that it reminded me so much of Howl's Moving Castle. So much. So Nathaniel is such a Howl. It's really good. Oh, and this is the book with another character named Silas. If you're, you know, kind of tired of always rereading Harry Potter every Halloween, give this a try. It's a little bit bigger, but you could easily read this, you know. You still have a couple of days, but you could easily read this in one go. Could you? In one day, not one go. You need to pee and eat. It's so good. And Howl's Moving Castle is also, it's one of my favorite movies in general. I'm always watching it, but I'm always more drawn to it around, you know, Halloween. Whenever everything is feeling more magical, I wanna watch it, and I feel like this book is, you know, it's sort of an equivalent, although you have the book Howl's Moving Castle. It really reminded me of it. So this, if you don't want to go for something that's scary or spooky, this does have a little bit of mystery. It does, you know, meddle with demons, but it's not scary, it's not spooky. It's just good old-fashioned magic and fantasy and lighthearted. I don't know. It's so good. It's really cozy as well. It's really, so if you want a middle ground between, you know, coziness, autumnal coziness and magic for Samhain, perfect read. And lastly, a book which I do not own physically, but I do want to get immediately, is The Diviners by Libba Bray. This book is the last one but it is also, you know, the book to read on Halloween. It's the book. It has everything. It's sort of a murder mystery. It's a thriller. It's paranormal. It's, you know, like a found family sort of thing. It has everything. It has romance, great friendships, a grumpy uncle. That's a weird one. But it's so good. It's on the bigger side, but again, this is a book that you will not want to put down. If you want to do a readathon, some people would like to read a lot of small books, but maybe you want to tackle a huge book in one day. Perfect. Perfect for Samhain. So good. You know how Zoe read It in 24 hours? You could do the same with the Diviners. And let me tell you, this one is actually scary. Naughty John is a scary ass bastard. The one thing that's really funny, so if you listen to the audiobook, and you know, even just from reading it, the way that it is composed, his song, this isn't really a spoiler though, is it? This character has, it's not really a spoiler. It's there from the beginning, I think. So there's this entity, Naughty John, and he has a song that you can sing to the tune of Spider-Man, like Spider-Man, Spider-Man. Like, Naughty John does his work with his apricot. And I think that's hilarious. It kind of makes him less scary. So, it can be a scary read. It's not horrifying. It does get a little bit gory in some descriptions. I don't personally find it outright really scary or really gory or anything, but it does have a little bit of those elements, so just be wary. And if you are looking for, you know, a YA, not super horrifying book, but with those elements, then again, perfect reads. So I was again checking the page count. Goodreads says that the hardcover has 578 pages. So, you know, it's not the biggest book. It's just a little bit bigger than my other recommendations, but I feel like you'll fly through it. It really stands on its own really well. It has its own nice arc. So it's very satisfying. The ending makes you want to read more, but you're also satisfied at the same time, which I feel like it's the perfect compromise, because sometimes books just end in such a huge cliffhanger, and sometimes they're too well wrapped up. You don't really care to read the second one. You'll be okay, like nicely wrapped up, but I also want to read the following books because not everything is completely wrapped up. There's still a lot more to know. And it does that thing where it ends one adventure, but it gives you a little hint as to what is going to happen next. It's so good. I really want to read more Libba Bray, like desperately. These are my recommendations of books that I have read and that I have loved, and I think are perfect to be read on Halloween. I will say that there have been some new releases that really sound incredible to be read around this time. So I will mention a few books that I am also dying to read, and I might read for Halloween if I can get that day, you know, to myself. I do have some things to do. That's why I haven't been reading that much. But one of them is my current read, which I've only read like the first little chapter, but I did enjoy that chapter, I guess. Not really a review, it's one chapter, and that is Serpent and Dove. This is only the dust jacket, but you get the point. The Serpent and Dove. Actually, the dust jacket is really pretty on the inside, so you know, everything works out. I'm currently reading this. I haven't read enough to know if I like it or not. But again, in terms of plot and theme, it's a great release for this time of year. So there's a witch and a witch hunter. It sounds really, really good. Another recent release that I haven't read because I haven't had the time, but I am really looking forward to reading it, is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. And this is also about a cemetery, not a cemetery, but about, you know, grave diggers and things coming back to life. So another recent release that sounds perfect. Just, you know, grave diggers, a map maker with a mysterious past. It sounds really good for someone. Then we have two books that I don't own. One of them I am actually waiting to get in the mail, but I do have a tiny preview that I got on Owlcrate, and that is The Beautiful by Renee Audier. This is, all I need to tell you is vampires in New Orleans. Right? That got me, you know, immediately hooked. I needed to get it. I needed to read it. I did seeing the beginning pages, someone speaking Portuguese, and that got me really excited. I think she might be from Brazil. But yeah, I haven't read the preview in its entirety just because I'm already dying to get my hands on the book. If I read this, I'm just torturing myself. So another recent release that I haven't read yet, but would love to read on Samhain. And another one I don't have yet. I have not purchased it yet because, again, I already have so many books to read, like immediately. I am very behind on my October Halloween-y reads. But that is a book that everyone has been talking about, Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Yeah. I mean, I don't really need to mention it, but I guess for the purpose of mentioning new releases that I would personally love to read during Halloween, you know, this had to be mentioned. It just, secret societies at Yale, and I actually did Yale summer session last year. So not this summer, the previous one. And that was, you know, an incredible, incredible experience that I would never, you know, think of in my wildest dreams. I would get that opportunity. So I'm really excited to pick this up and read about something that I would love to read about anyway, you know, secret societies in Yale. But having been there, it just sounds incredible. I was seeing Leigh Bardugo's Instagram stories when she was doing the her meets in at Yale in New Haven, and she was like showing pictures of the entrance to Skull and Bones, and I was like, oh, I've been there, and I was like messaging my friends from Yale. And me and one of my friends would actually, you know, we were always touring the campus, taking lots and lots of pictures, but we loved looking for the secret society stuff, you know, and all of the folklore. The cemetery is so pretty. So those are my book recommendations of books that I have loved and think you will love to read during Halloween, and books that I would personally love to read on Halloween. So I hope you enjoy this. If you do pick up one of these books, I hope you like it, and please let me know if you've read any of these, if you enjoy them, if you have any recommendations of your own, maybe I'll check them out. So thank you so much for watching. I will be back with more videos soon. Please do remember to like and subscribe. All my social media is linked down below if you want to follow me elsewhere. And I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye!